السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. ألا وإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. My dear brothers and sisters, today is the 22nd of Muharram, the night of the 22nd of Muharram, which coincides with the 9th of September 2020. And inshallah ta'ala, we are going to talk about one of the very important topic of our religion, which is to make Salat al-Istikhara. We have it in two parts, inshallah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us to learn the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and practice it, inshallah, based upon what we learn, so that we can implement the sunnah. Salat al-Istikhara, the definition of it basically is, it is a 2 rakat optional prayer, 2 rakat optional prayer that a Muslim, he prays after he decides to do something. When he is convinced that he wants to do something, he seeks Allah's help. If this is good for him, he asks Allah to make it happen for him, to make it easy for him, seeks His blessings. And if this is not good for him, since he doesn't know, Allah knows, he asks Allah's help to prevent it from happening for him, and he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him an alternate solution. This is basically what Salat al-Istikhara is. It is a 2 rakat optional prayer specifically for this need. And then there is a specific dua that the Prophet ﷺ taught, as we will see inshallah ta'ala. The Salat al-Istikhara is basically based upon one authentic hadith, clear authentic hadith, which is reported by Imam al-Bukhari in his Sahih, which is the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhu. This hadith has been reported by all of the six, the Sahih Sitta, or the six books of hadith, the Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, and An-Nasai, the six books, except Imam Muslim. Except Imam Muslim, all of them, they reported this hadith in their Sahih or in their Jami or in their Sunan. Imam al-Bukhari, as you know, the Imam of A'imma, and they call him the Amirul Mu'minin fil Hadith, and he was one of the major scholar also of the ilal of hadith, the hidden defects of hadith. Imam al-Bukhari put this hadith in 3 different books. In Kitab al-Tahajjud, in the book of the night prayer, Bab ma ja'a min at-tatawwu'i mathna mathna, what comes into the optional prayer, 2 rakat optional prayer, mathna mathna, 2 rakat optional prayer. Then he also reported this in Kitab al-Da'wat, the books of the supplication, Bab ad-du'a inda al-istikhara, the chapter of the dua when we are going to do the istikhara. Then also he mentioned it at the end, which is Kitab al-Tawheed, the book of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bab qawlillahi ta'ala, the chapter, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Qul huwa al-Qadir. Say, O Muhammad, that He is al-Qadir, meaning Allah is al-Qadir, Allah is the capable. These are the 3 places the Imam al-Bukhari, he mentioned this hadith, and that shows that with an authentic, with a connected chain of narration, and that the ulama of the hadith, they know that Imam al-Bukhari, he is convinced that this hadith is authentic. From the aspect of the chain of narration, this narration is basically, they call it the madar, or the where the chain is concentrated. A common part of the chain of narration is a narrator called Abdurrahman ibn Abil Mawali, who narrated from Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir, who narrated from the Sahabi Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, who narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam al-Bukhari, in his book, there are those chain of narration, he has only 4 people between him and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those are known as the Rubai, the chains which are Rubai, and this is one of the hadith which is the chain Rubai, meaning between the Imam al-Bukhari, Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari, and Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is only 4 narrators. So it's very strongly connected with a authentic chain from Imam al-Bukhari to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, Abdurrahman ibn Abil Mawali, this narrator, he has some kalam, words against him, i.e. He narrates when the ulama of the hadith, they checked his narration, they found that in the hadith he narrates, many times he narrates munkar narration, meaning not authentic narrations, weak narrations. Okay, so he has some kalam against him, the words against him, some criticism against him. However, they said when he narrates from Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir, then the narrations are acceptable, as in this case Imam al-Bukhari chose this narration, and that is one of the reason Imam Ahmed, and this is one of the great Imam of Hadith and the teacher of Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, and the Sahib al-Musnad, the one who has the Musnad al-Kabir, the big compilation of Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to consider this Hadith as munkar. Now munkar is one of the classification Hadith which are weak. So some of the ulama of the hadith, they said Imam Ahmed, when he mentioned this hadith is munkar, what he means by that is this is one of the narration which is the only narration of Abdurrahman ibn Mawali, meaning there is nobody who narrated from Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir except Abdurrahman ibn Abil Mawali, since he has manakir, since he narrates weak narrations, and he is tafarrada bihi, meaning he is the only one he narrated here from Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir. That is what he means by munkar. So their conclusion about the statement of Imam Ahmed is that they say that Imam Ahmed did not consider this hadith to be weak. Then there are others who considered that no, when he mentioned munkar, he means the narration is weak. Khulasat al-Qawl, even though Imam Ahmed's position is this, could be that, but majority of the ulama of the hadith and big ones, for example Imam al-Bukhari, for example Imam ibn Hibban, for example Imam al-Tirmidhi, and this is one of the students of Imam al-Bukhari, and Abu Dawood and others, they used to consider this hadith to be authentic. Fadlan, specifically now we have Sahih al-Bukhari, which is being accepted unanimously by all of the ulama of the hadith of the past and the present. They do not dispute about this hadith, the authenticity of this hadith. Why we are discussing this issue? We are discussing this issue because there are some people who do not understand ilm al-hadith, and they usually find these opportunities to attack the books of the hadith. For example, there are some people who might come and tell you, oh, Sahih al-Bukhari is not an authentic book of hadith. And you say, why? They say, because it has munkar narration. We say, how are you saying this? Yes, it's one of the hadith, and Imam Ahmed considered this hadith as munkar. And they're right. But they're using the information, the right information, for the wrong purpose. To basically plant seeds of doubt in the hearts of the Muslims with regards to the texts. Once this seed of doubt is planted in the heart of the Muslims, it's going to affect them, and they will not be able to fully trust these books. They will always think, oh well, if this hadith is weak, that hadith could be weak. This is how they create commotion and confusion. And they basically, and as you know, there is a group of people, they always say, we do not need the hadith, we only need the Quran. And these are the opportunities they look for to plant seeds of doubts in the heart of the Muslims. So we need to understand that just because a hadith is being criticized by one scholar of hadith or a group of scholars of hadith, not necessarily it means that the hadith is weak. And if you remember, when we were talking about the issue of the fasting of Saturday, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Busr, which is reported by Imam ibn Majah and Abu Dawood and others, this hadith, when we were discussing, we talked about so many scholars of hadith, they consider this hadith to have defect. However, the ulama of the hadith. There are other groups of ulama, they came and they refuted them and they showed that the hadith has no defect. And this is not just for this and that hadith. There are sometimes discussion about many hadith like this. Some scholars would come and find that they have an issue with the hadith and they will say the hadith is weak, whereas the other scholars come and clarify that. So just because a hadith is being graded as weak by one scholar of hadith or a group, not necessarily, I'm saying not necessarily, it means that the hadith is weak. And specifically in this case, we should not have any doubt about this hadith. This hadith is very authentic, and the only reason I brought this up is not for you to have doubt, but for you to have yaqeen, inshallah ta'ala, and do not pay attention to these statements which some people they say, as I mentioned about this hadith. The hadith, alhamdulillah, is hujjah, is an evidence for all of us. As with regards to the text, then the Sahabi Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, one of the Sahabi noble companion, young, and he was also his father was also Abdullah ibn Haram, was another great companion who was basically killed in the battle of Uhud. He was from the Shuhada of Uhud, and there is a beautiful story with regards to him, Jabir ibn Abdullah and his father, and so on and so forth. Maybe another occasion we will discuss this when it comes to the golden series of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. It's something that I'm planning to start recording, inshallah, so the brothers can benefit from the authentic evidences, the lives of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يعلمنا الاستخارة في الأمور كلها كالسورة من القرآن. He said that the Prophet of Allah used to teach us istikhara, Salat al-Istikhara, for all matters, as he used to teach us the surah of the Quran. So from this statement we understand the Salat al-Istikhara was very important, and the Prophet ﷺ frequently used to teach the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. This was something that was taught in general to the companions, like the way he taught the surah min al-Quran, the chapters of the Quran. Now the question comes is when he said fil umuri kulliha, fil umur, in the matters, kulliha. Kul, the word kul means everything. So the word kul in the lugha has two meanings. Depending on in which context it's used, the kul could mean everything, meaning ta'mim, am, everything is included. And kul could also mean in some context, takhsis, specific, certain things. For example, if I say all the things here is from my dad, it doesn't mean that everything that I have is from my dad. Maybe these couple of things, my computer, my mouse, and all these things, whatever here, is from my dad, for example. So here I'm using the word kul as a takhsis, a specific. Okay. Now let's look into the Quran and give you two examples. In one case, kul means ta'mim. In one case, kul means takhsis. For example, in Surah Al-Ahqaf, Allah Ta'ala says, تُدَمِّرُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ بِأَمْرِ رَبِّهَا فَأَصْبَحُوا لَا يُرَى إِلَّا مَسَاكِنُهُم. Destroying everything by the command of Allah. Everything. Now this word everything, kul, does it mean everything was destroyed? The answer is no. We know that the believers, because this is talking about the nation of Ad. So only the disbelievers were destroyed. As for the believers and Prophet Hud alayhi salam, he was not destroyed. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately says, فَأَصْبَحُوا لَا يُرَى إِلَّا مَسَاكِنُهُم. And it became such that nothing could be seen except their dwelling places, which means the dwelling places were not destroyed, like the way the kuffar they were and the other things which were destroyed. So here the word kul does not mean everything. Kul here means certain things. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir, Allah is able to do everything. Now we know that here, of course, the general aqidah and the fitrah teaches the Muslims and the believers, and then we go to the Quran and the Sunnah, of course, that Allah is able to do everything. So here the kul means shumul, like it covers everything. Similarly, when the Prophet ﷺ said, Kullu bid'atin dalala, all bid'ah, all innovations in the religion will lead to misguidance. So when it says all innovation in religion, it means all. So there is nothing called good bid'ah and bad bid'ah. But the Prophet when he said, وَكُلُّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ, all newly invented matters will lead to bid'ah. So there is two type of newly invented matters. Newly invented matters with regards to the dunya, and newly invented matters with regards to the religion. As for the newly invented matters with regards to the dunya, for example, the computer, the mouse, the lighting and the fan and the microphone and all these things, these are muhdathatil umur, but not with regards to the religion, with regards to the dunya, worldly matters. So it is allowed. It doesn't lead to innovation. But which then here the kul here means a specific type of newly invented matters which with regards to the deen will lead to innovation. And then kullu bid'atin dalala. Now the kullu bid'ah here talking about all sorts of bid'ah, meaning all sorts of innovation in the religion. And kullu dalalatin finnar. When Allah the Prophet said kullu dalalatin finnar, it doesn't mean some misguidance will lead to paradise. No, it means all misguidance, all type of misguidance, small and big, will lead to hellfire, except if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives. Similarly, the Prophet's statement, kullu muskirin khamr, all that intoxicates is khamr, is intoxicant beverage. Wa kullu khamrin haram, and all intoxicants are forbidden to consume, whether they come from dates or whether they come from grapes or whether they come from rice or whether they come from fruits or whether they come from barley, whatever. As long as it is an intoxicant, whether it is liquid, whether it is solid, whether it is gas, as long as it is intoxicant, muskir, then it is a khamr, and that khamr is prohibited. So this is how we understand this statement here when Jabir ibn Abdullah said all, he used to teach istikhara in all matters. Here the all does not mean every matter. How do we know? The context teaches us, because we do not make istikhara for obligatory things. For example, we do not tell our children in the morning, today you are going to pray 5 rakat, 5 times obligatory prayer, make istikhara. There is no istikhara for obligation. Okay? We never make istikhara, abadan, not even allowed. Similarly, we do not make istikhara for muharramat, prohibition. For example, somebody doesn't say, I'm going to go and steal. Let me make istikhara. A'udhu billah. This will be kufr. Similarly, somebody doesn't say, I don't want to steal. Stealing is bad. I decided I will not steal. But let me make istikhara. There is no istikhara, because it's halal and haram. Similarly, mustahabbat. For example, I want to pray Salatul Duha. I don't say let me make istikhara to pray Salatul Duha. Okay? I want to make tasbih. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. Let me make istikhara. There is no istikhara for these things. So what are the matters that has istikhara? The matters where there is a choice, worldly matters, and even in certain cases religious matters, but there is a choice, and we are going to explain. When we look at the examples, you will understand what the word kul means in the hadith of Jabir. For example, somebody wants to marry a certain person. Now, he makes istikhara not for marriage, but he makes istikhara for marrying this specific girl. Or he makes istikhara for marrying, let's say, this month or next month, for example. But the marriage itself, there is no istikhara, because it is something that all the Muslims, able Muslims, should do. They should get married. This is a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fulfill their faith. For example, somebody wants to do business. Okay, business is halal. There is nothing to say that I want to do business, I want to make istikhara. Yes, you can make istikhara for doing a certain type of business. You can make istikhara to choose, you have chosen somebody as your partner. You can make istikhara for that. You want to choose business as your profession. Then you can make istikhara. Yes. Okay. These are all allowed cases for making. So for example, somebody chooses to make istikhara, a student, he wants to choose a certain college for education. He can make istikhara. For choosing a certain job, he can make istikhara, as long, of course, the job and the education is halal. For example, somebody is going for Hajj and he chose a certain organization to go for Hajj. Certain companions he chose to go for Hajj. He can make istikhara for those issues. But he cannot make istikhara for Hajj itself, because Hajj is obligatory. But he can make istikhara that I decided to go for Hajj, I want to make, and these are the situations, I want to make istikhara for them. That is Absolutely fine, because he is not making istikhara for Hajj. He is making istikhara because he chose a specific year to go for Hajj, where he thinks that it would be good for him and it has become obligatory for him to go for Hajj. So I hope inshallah ta'ala it should be clear from this discussion that it is not all matters, it is certain matters. And when it comes to religious matters, yes, in certain religious matters, as you can see, you can make istikhara. In certain religious matters, you cannot make istikhara. You are not supposed to make istikhara, as we have clarified. Then the Sahabi says, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, that the Prophet said, إِذَا هَمَّ أَحَدُكُمْ بِالْأَمْرِ فَلْيَرْكَعْ رَكَعَتَيْنِ مِنْ غَيْرِ الْفَرِيضَةِ ثُمَّ لِيَقُلْ. The Prophet said, when you, إِذَا هَمَّ, and hamma, the ulama said, إِذَا قَصَدَ, which means he decided to do something about a matter, he decided to do, فَلْيَرْكَعْ رَكَعَتَيْنِ, then he prays 2 rak'ah, غَيْرَ الْفَرِيضَةِ, and it is not an obligatory prayer, ثُمَّ لِيَقُلْ, then he says, and then he taught the dua. This statement clearly shows that the 2 rakat of Salatul Istikhara is optional, it is not obligatory. Second, it shows that Salatul Istikhara we do after we decide to do something. Some people, they think that they have a couple of choices and they are not sure which one to choose. They think at this point, since they are undecided, they should make istikhara and ask Allah to help them to decide. This is not the right way to do istikhara. Okay. Now here is the thing: if you want to ask Allah to help you to decide something, you can just make a dua in your prayer or this and that. But Salat al-Istikhara, you don't do it like this. Salat al-Istikhara we do after, as the Prophet said, إِذَا هَمَّ أَحَدُكُمْ إِذَا قَصَدَ, when you have decided to do something. So let's say that you have 3 girls that you are considering to, one of them to get married, of course, not all of them, one of them to get married. So let's say it is Zainab, you chose. Okay, now you make istikhara for marrying Zainab. But we have Salma, Zainab and Khadija, and you are not sure, everybody is good to you and you feel good about all of them, you are confused. There is no istikhara because you are confused. Now what you should choose is mashwara. You should consult with your learned ones, with your scholars, with your elders, especially with your parents. Never ever leave them in the matter of marriage. A lot of boys, they think that they can get married and they don't need the permission of their parents, which means they can ignore their parents. Impossible. Because this girl that you're going to bring, she's going to either support your family or it might be a division between you and your family. So it should be a combined effort to choose the righteous girl for your family, inshallah ta'ala, for the right reason. Anyway, this is basically when we do Salat al-Istikhara. This 2 rakat, which is optional as we mentioned, it is not obligatory, it must accompany the dua. It must accompany the dua. Without the dua, without the salat, there is no istikhara. So there is no istikhara just with the dua. Because a lot of people, they say, can I just say the dua? No, you cannot say the dua. If you want to do the istikhara, you have to pray the 2 rakat optional, and then you, once you decide, of course, then you pray, say the dua, and inshallah we're going to cover the dua very soon. Then the other question comes is the brothers say, I started a 2 rakat, just a 2 rakat nafal prayer, and then while I'm praying, I thought, oh, I have to make istikhara. While I'm praying, I started the prayer. While during the prayer, at any stage, I say, oh, I have to do istikhara. Let me make this Salat al-Istikhara. You cannot do that. Why we cannot do that? Because the intention of a deed has to be before we start the deed. We cannot change the intention while we are doing something. So for example, I started the 2 rakat sunnah prayer. Then in the middle of the prayer, I say, oh, let me make it 2 rakat sunnah of dhuhr. Not going to work. Okay? It's not going to work. We cannot change the intention inside the action while we are inside the action. For example, you started a nafal fasting. And then during the day you said, oh, I have some missed day of fasting of Ramadan. Let me make this obligatory. Too late. You have to have the intention before you start the action. As the hadith is very clear, innamal a'malu binniyah. Because when you started the deed, what was your intention is defines the action. You cannot change it in between. The intention that we have for Salat al-Istikhara, of course, there is no verbalization. As some people that teach Nu'aytu an usalli lillah, all of these terms and du'as that people teach. These are bid'ah. These are innovation, cultural innovations. What is the intention? Intention is in the heart. This is you're doing it for istikhara, for a certain matter, and that's it, inshallah. That is your intention. And you seek Allah's help. There is a discussion amongst the ulama regarding the 2 rakah. Can this 2 rakat be any optional prayer? For example, let's say I am going to pray 2 rakat of sunnah of dhuhr, or let's say 2 rakat of any of the rawatib prayer, or let's say 2 rakat of salat after I made wudu. I usually pray 2 rakat after wudu. I'm not saying I do that. I'm saying, let's say somebody says that he does it. Can he make this 2 rakat the 2 rakat the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, and then do the Salat al-Istikhara, or this 2 rakah has to be specifically for Salat al-Istikhara? Some of the ulama, like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala and many others, they say that it could be any. You can choose. You can make your rawatib prayer, or Salat Dukhul al-Masjid, or Tahiyatul Masjid, or Salat al-Wudu, the 2 rakat of the wudu, and so on and so forth. You can make this the base and then make the dua of Istikhara. Whereas other scholars, they said, this has also big names like Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala, Sheikh Hassan Abdul Fattah al-Barqawi, many other of the scholars, mashallah, and students of knowledge. Their position is that no, Salat al-Istikhara is mustaqilla. It is something separate. You have to have a separate intention. You cannot mix it with any other optional prayer, and this is what looks to be most correct when we look at the differences of opinion amongst the ulama rahimahullah ta'ala. Then we have the issue of the khilaf. When do we say the dua? Do we say the dua before the taslim or after the taslim? Some of the ulama, like Imam al-Qastilani, one of those who explain Sahih al-Bukhari, who has the book Irshad al-Sari, and some of the other ulama, they said you can say this dua either in the sujood or in the tashahhud before you say the salam, or even after the salam. So they are flexible about when to say the dua. Whereas the other group of scholars, like this is Imam al-Albani and Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan and many others of the past and present, they said no. You say the dua after you finish the prayer, because the word thumma here, when the Prophet ﷺ said, then thumma liyaqul, then he says the thumma here is at-tarahi, meaning, or as talking about the tartib, meaning after you pray, you say the dua. So the correct position, Allah knows best, is that you say the 2 rakat prayer of Salat al-Istikhara, you salam out, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then you say the dua. Is there any specific surah that needs to be said? No, there is no specific surah, but this is very commonly said. You should say Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun and Qul huwallahu ahad. And this comes from the opinion of Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. But actually there is no proof for saying that there should be certain surahs be said or certain ayat be said. It should be left open. If you want to say Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun Qul huwallahu ahad, which I like to say in many of my optional prayer, it's up to you. If you want to say any other surah, Ayatul Kursi for example, a part of the surah, this all up to you. There is no, what the Prophet ﷺ left open, we should not restrict it. And what the Prophet ﷺ restricted, we should not generalize it. This is the general qaida principle of the ulama. They say, Atlaqu ma atlaqallah wa qayyadu ma qayyadallah. Inshallah ta'ala, in the next section, we are going to cover the meaning of the dua and some other issues of Salat al-Istikhara. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.